So, well, I wanted I wanted to share a little bit of the class that we had yesterday, our beginners class. we tackled the third foundation of mindfulness yesterday. Even that's kind of like doesn't it just kind of like put you off a little bit? The third foundation of mindfulness, does it or not? I mean, it's not like inviting. Come and have a piece of my third foundation. It's very delicious. So we tackled that yesterday, and it was very interesting. And I must say, it's always such a pleasure to introduce these ideas, and sort of like there was a time, I forgot, maybe about 10 years ago, when there was this Bible verse that became very popular. Everyone was talking about it in the churches. The prayer of Jabez. What is it? The prayer of Jabez, yes. That was just a big thing. It might have been 15 years ago. It was a long time ago. I mean, people were emailing me, have you read the prayer of Jabez? And it was about, I said, oh, Lord, help me to expand my territory, which I just thought, well, that's working very well in Palestine, isn't it? Right? Oh, Lord, help me to expand my territory. I mean, I don't really mean to be smart alecky. We all know I do, right? But I did think that was so interesting, and I thought about it a lot and gave a Dharma talk. As I said, it was a long time ago. And I gave a Dharma talk about the idea of what would that mean to expand the territory of mindfulness, as opposed to this idea of expanding my space. We seem to be wanting to expand physical space, right? I need another room on my house, right? I need an extra closet for my possessions. But expanding the territory of mindfulness would be folding in more aspects of the four foundations of mindfulness, right? So it's like, so each time we have a new beginner's class, it's always kind of fun for me because we're folding in more aspects. We're expanding the territory of mindfulness. And I came up with I've been struggling with a definition of mindfulness. Struggling is too strong a word. I've been pondering what is mindfulness for a long time. A long time. I've never really read a definition of it that worked for me. It's fun. It's sort of like we describe it, by saying this angle of it, that angle. We talk around it. It's almost like painting a portrait, and so that it's, mindfulness is then what we come up with at the end. And I remember, I think I wrote this that in Analaya's wonderful book on the Satipatthana Sutra. That's kind of like the way he really defines mindfulness. He comes at it from this position and from this position. Do you remember Shinsen Yan's definition of mindfulness? It's very elegant.
He doesn't have it.
He does, actually. Years ago, he said it's a threefold attentional set, something, blah, blah, blah. I got lost.
Well, he's on concentration, clarity, and equanimity, but he says that if you ask him to define mindfulness, he can't define it.
Right.
We talk about it,
right.
Just what you're...
Well, that's what Analaya does, and but everybody does it. So I'm going to give a definition. Right? I'm not. I'm going to share with you a way of looking at mindfulness that has just been extremely helpful for me recently. So anyway, before we get into that, let me go back a little bit. And so the first week of when we introduced sati, that's the word, sati is the word that the Buddha used. 3 weeks ago, we talked about, and it's interesting, in the sutra, it's referred to as contemplation of the body. I think that's very interesting. What does that mean, contemplation of the body, because in a sense, when we think about meditating, we don't think about that we're contemplating, do we? We're trying to just be very still. So we talked about the sensations of the body, the breath, the body breathing, all of the sense doors. The contemplation of the body would be contemplating the seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, smelling. And then the next week, last week, we talked about Vedana, contemplation of the feeling. And as you know, and we've talked about it many times, but the feeling, it's quite different in Buddhism from what we consider feeling in the West. We kind of think of feeling, I feel happy, I feel sad, I feel angry, right? We think of feeling as emotion. But in Buddhism, it's pulled way back down to this base line of what you almost would call feeling tone. I feel negative, positive, or neutral, or pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. So, I've always said it's like taking a thermometer and sticking your ear and getting the temperature. That's the feeling tone, right? It's, it's like it's either a slightly unpleasant into that neutral zone or pleasant. So and of course it's extraordinarily important in Buddhism to have developed the faculty of mindfulness, to be aware of what that feeling tone is. Because if you're not aware of your feeling tone, pleasant feelings can pretty much lead right on into, pretty soon, I need that, I want that, I've got to have it, right? Craving. And unpleasant feelings will lead into, I don't want that. And before you know it, you're into aversion. So that's what happens when we're oblivious, we're not aware of feeling. The feeling tone, it will take us to greed or aversion. Just invariably it will. That's kind of discouraging, isn't it? I mean, if you're feeling something this very minute, and you are, and you're not trained to look at it, as you're not, and I'm not, and yet what you're feeling is going to be leading you in some direction. So what did the Buddha say neutral feelings are leading you towards? Confusion, delusion. That's terrible, right? So how many times did we sit for 45 minutes? We just sat for 45 minutes. Some of you sat for longer. That's a joke. 45 minutes. And how many times did you go into a neutral zone where you were just spaced out and didn't know where you were, who you were, or what you were? Anybody have that happen? Monica did. We all did. Let's be real here. Except Robert. We all did. And so, but you see, that's the thing that he's saying. So that's why neutral feelings can be pleasant. I mean, nice to be neutral in a way, but they're dangerous if they're unknown, because they lead into just, being sort of spaced out, and which can be a lot of our day. So that's in Pali it's pronounced. They don't pronounce the V. They call it Vedana. I sat with the teacher, and he kept talking. I kept writing W-E-D-N-A, and I kept saying, "What is that Vedana?" That's And then finally I realized that it was Vedana. You've heard me say that my name in Pali would be Victor. It's true. It'd be Vipassana, not Vipassana. That's just an aside. We'll edit this part out. So then, yesterday, we went to the third one, which is, I think is, in a sense, it's in some ways, to me, is the crucial turning one. It's the ability to be mindful of the mind. Hello. It's one thing to say you're not mindful of the feeling tone. That's even is kind of subtle, isn't it? But a lot of people, you say, well, I was mindful of my mind, and a lot of people look at you and say, what? What do you mean you were mindful of your mind as you were looking at your mind? Or I guess the actual word is citta, which actually means mind, heart, but it would be contemplating citta, which actually would also be defined as contemplating consciousness, being aware of consciousness. How many people are aware of consciousness right this minute? You wouldn't be able to hear, you wouldn't, if you weren't conscious, you'd be asleep. Period. I mean, we're actually a little conscious even when we're asleep. But I mean, we're conscious. But how often are we aware of consciousness? Just think about it. It's astonishing how present it is, moment to moment, how real it is, and yet how we're not trained to be aware of it. So the third foundation would be aware of consciousness. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about that today. The fourth one is, in my opinion, screwed up. The fourth, it actually is, I've never heard three teachers define it the same way. I'm not kidding. It's quite amazing. And there's something very strange about the way it was translated or written. The odds are that sutra was written after the Buddha's death, by the way. And so, although the Buddha talked about mindfulness all over the place, but the Satipatthana Sutra there's a lot of evidence that was actually written maybe quite a bit later. So the fourth one is very difficult, and maybe I'll try to talk about it next week. It's very difficult, and because it's just totally unclear really what it is. So when I was sitting at the Forest Refuge, and so this was in August. Maybe, no, I think it was in September. It was recent. So I was sitting one day and doing my little meditation, and so I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden, I could smell this strong fragrance, It was really strong. So we have all these signs. This is a fragrance-free zone, blah, blah, blah. And I noticed I got an email from Spirit Rock, and it was right on the very beginning. But anyway, so because everyone gets super sensitive. I mean, oh my Lord. I mean, you want to talk about sensitive people, I mean, like you can cough and people. I'm really not exaggerating. It's like, because I mean, you can see, like if you've been sitting for, a month or 2 months, people get very sensitive. So I'm sitting there and I smell this, and so here I am, and it was kind of so I immediately thought, oh, pleasant. So, right, that would be feeling tone, right? Pleasant. Sat there for a minute, pleasant. Then came the thought, they shouldn't be wearing that. It was the strangest thing. I mean, and so then I went back. I thought, well, okay. So I went back, feeling tone, pleasant. Who the hell is that in here who's wearing that perfume? That's too strong. So it was amazing to experience the difference in the second foundation and the third foundation. The second foundation, there was a kind of a pleasant feeling tone. And the third foundation, I was getting pretty irate about it, And then of course I had to open my eyes. Who is that around me who's doing that, right? And then I thought, oh, I know who it is, that guy right there. So then I started saying, yeah, look, I think he's just taking a shower and he's wearing some very strong shower, shampoo or something. How thoughtless could you be? It was ridiculous. It was just ridiculous. And then I would go back and it's kind of a pleasant smell. And it was really interesting to experience, number one, because, you'll think that the feeling tone, pleasant, would lead to a pleasant thought, but not necessarily. I struggled between those two for quite a while. He got up and left early. There's no bell. You can leave whenever you want to. He might have picked up my evil vibrations. He left early, and then all of a sudden, I realized the smell was still going very strong. I thought, oh, hell. I was mad at the wrong person. Then I thought, oh, it's that girl right back there. I think she's a yogi. She looks like she does yoga. So I'm not going on. This just doesn't end. It's like it kind of frittered away. As I sat, the more I sat with it, maybe the more I was mindful of the third foundation, maybe the anger dissipated slowly. So by the end of the set, it was fine. But I'm not swearing that that's true. It might have just been dissipating on its own. So I was let's just say that I was mindful of those two foundations, second and third, but let's say that my mindfulness was not so powerful that it helped me really move through it. There was still this me. There was still this Victor who was blaming somebody for wearing aftershave lotion. So then yesterday, it was just kind of like a perfect thing. So here we've been working with mindfulness of the body, and then we've been working with mindfulness of feeling, and now yesterday we're going to mindfulness of the mind itself, which the Buddha would say is if you are contemplating consciousness, you know if there's greed in consciousness. You know if there's anger in consciousness, or the absence of greed. Right? It's not like you would know that you're not feeling greedy right now, or you would know that there's no anger in your mind. You would know if there's metta, right? If you're feeling loving kindness. I mean, obviously, if you're looking at consciousness, you're going to know that. You see it. It's there. Everything is there to be seen if you are mindful of it. So, some teachers. I know there's this one teacher who calls the third foundation the actual climate of the climate of the mind, right? If there's a hurricane coming through, if there's wind coming through, if there's rain coming through, if there's sunlight coming through, if it's a breezy, balmy day, right, coming through, the climate is, and there's always some climate in your brain, in our mind. Someone else calls it the landscape. But in other words, it's this willingness to look at the mind itself. As I said, you all have heard me say this before. There's a book. I really love this book. It's a little collection of essays. The title of it is Minding Mind. Minding Mind. That's the third foundation of mindfulness, minding mind. So in this moment, you could be, to some extent, trying to be minding your own mind as opposed to just completely lost in, the entertainment up here on the stage. Right? I mean, I am very entertaining. Let's just face fact. So so the degree to which you pull back a little bit, and you're always interested in watching watching you, watching this, watching you, watching. So that I just wanted to give you a little bit of a definition of that. And so yesterday, one of the guys that sits right here, and he's just great, and we all heard him yesterday. It was just a lovely moment. I just loved it. He's very serious. He's clearly going to be sitting. I mean, it's clear that he has sat for a long time before this lifetime. I really do mean that. And so he said, so he wanted to share. He was at work this week, and someone called, and I guess it was like a real, I'm not going to say the word. It would be, the initial would be A-H. And he said the person really was not nice, and at the end of the conversation, the person had cost them quite a bit of money. So he said, this guy is a kind of like, I think he's very much in his body. So he was really angry, and so, I mean, he said he was just livid. And I asked him, I said, well, how did that feel in your body? And he said, and he opened his arm, he said, I literally hurt in my soul. I just love that, right? Have you ever heard that experience? Have you ever had that? I hurt in my soul. So he said, I really did check with that first foundation. I checked with the feelings, my body sensations, he hurt in his soul. And then he said, and I got the feeling. He said it was very unpleasant. So he said, I was just noting, unpleasant, but it wasn't going away. And so then I said, when you feel homicidal, it doesn't help to say unpleasant. Right? I've had that experience, by the way. So, someone has made you so angry you want to kill them. Well, at least or like, I think I said yesterday, you send them loving kindness, but say, I hope you die early. So, but see, it was a perfect example, wasn't it? That he got the first two foundations, the body reaction and the feeling tone, which was unpleasant, but he wasn't able to then get into the real climate of the mind, which was rage. So you see, and if you think about it, can you grasp how profoundly difficult that is? I mean, it's one thing to sit there and say, pain. I mean, hello, right? You have a toothache, and how brilliant do you have to be to say pain, right? And actually, if you really meditate, you can sometimes begin to get some distance from that. Truly, got mindfulness, and so that there is a little bit of separation where you're watching. You say, okay, there's pain, and then there's the observation of the pain. It possibly can pull you out of just being fused with it. And then unpleasant, it's the same thing. That's a little bit more difficult, but you can be done. But then just think of the difficulty of pulling out of rage, of being mindful, of the mindfulness being so strong or so powerful that it pulls back and looks at rage. It hasn't fused with or become anger, right? I mean, it's a big deal. And so I thought it was just perfect, because here we were talking about the third foundation of mindfulness, and there he was talking about, he was trying to apply the first and the second to a situation which clearly needed the third one. The third one being the capacity to stay on the edge of the river, right, rather than being lost in it. To stay on the bank and to look at something that is completely, pulling the mind in a tremendous direction. When I got back from the Forest Refuge, and we started the beginners course on the 3 days later. So we're doing very well, the first week, and then the second week I get an email from someone in the Salon. I said, "Did you know? Are you aware that Inside LA has started a beginners course in Long Beach?" Did you think that I had any issues with anger? Oh my goodness! It's amazing. It was amazing how blindsided I was, just by this, that Los Angeles has decided to compete directly with us in Long Beach. And it was, so I thought about the guy yesterday as he was talking, because I thought, been there and done that. Been there and done that, because it was quite interesting to watch how I wanted to nurture that anger rather than deal with it, rather than apply mindfulness. It's almost like it feels kind of good to be angry. Have you ever noticed that? It's like, have you ever noticed that? It's kind of empowering. It's like you can feel kind of like powerless in your life or whatever, and then someone just absolutely, and so first of all, you're self-righteous, or I am. Well, how dare they do that? How dare Inside LA come down here and compete with us, So, I mean, it's like, so then I get very self-righteous with it. And, God forbid that they could be doing something good, or, teaching a good, beginner's course. God forbid that. Or that it could be of use to people. So that was my thing to work with. And as I said, well, I noticed, which was really interesting, I don't think that our friend yesterday, he got through his pretty quickly. What I noticed was that I really didn't want to let go of it. I really didn't want to let go of that anger. It was almost as if it was, like I say, it was, I don't want to say pleasant, but it felt good in some way. And what I told you all last week, see, you weren't here. I said, what the Buddha said about or maybe it was the week before, he said that what we do is we scratch our wound because it feels good. That's what we do with anger. Everybody does that. And of course, you know what happens if you scratch. You just, you make the infection worse. So not only, are you kind of prolonging whatever the condition is, but you're actually making it worse. So anyway, it wasn't really until I realized that I was clinging to kind of self-righteous anger that I began to apply mindfulness to it. And then it was pretty amazing how once you see it as just a story, you can begin to let go of it, as Mark did quite well. So I guess what I wanted to say is that the third foundation is so incredibly important because it really is dealing with where we are, where everybody. It's dealing with. It's dealing with where we really are, and again we can the Buddha said that if you could stay with your foundation, the first foundation of mindfulness, you could go all the way to awakening. And I suppose I'm not going to second guess the Buddha, but it does seem to me that without this ability to really, really bring mindfulness to the third foundation, we ain't got much of a chance. So this is where I'm going to give my famous definition, and it's only famous. It's not famous yet. It'll be famous when I say it, right? Because then you'll say, "Oh, gee," and we'll talk about it. But it's actually. As with everything in my life, it's not original. Some of you know I have been extremely taken with this amazing monk, Ananavira Tara, who was British and was in the British intelligence, and was so number one, he's a brilliant man, a brilliant translator and he spoke numbers of languages. Number two, he became very, very fascinated with Sartre, with Heidegger, with the existential philosophers, and so he brings like a brilliant mind to the Dharma. It's quite amazing, and he's a little bit. He's kind of like an embarrassment to the establishment. He was forever, and I know this really because a monk actually was talking to me about this, because I had never heard of it until I found his book. So anyway, one of his favorite words, and this is what triggered all of this, and when I say it's not original, because it's actually Nanavira is the one who said this. He constantly talks about reflection. And he spells it reflexion, right? Which I guess is the British, really, spelling of the word reflection. The way he kept saying it over and over, and I kept thinking it must be different from our American. It's two different. So then, of course, I looked it up and I Googled it and everything, and then it turns out that they're the same thing, apparently. So, but he uses it over and over, constantly in his discussion of the Dharma. And I became, so at one point, he literally said, well, mindfulness is reflection. That is what mindfulness is. It's reflection, the ability to reflect. So that reminded me, I went back in my mind, and I remember, I would say 2 decades ago, Joseph Goldstein was teaching at maybe IMS, I can't remember, or maybe later at the Far Stretches, but he described mindfulness as putting a frame around perception. Right? In other words, perception, but with with an emphasis, right? I mean, it's more than just mere perception. It's putting a frame around it. So I always thought that was a interesting and a good description of mindfulness. But it wasn't clear enough. But anyway, as I've started thinking about Nanavira's description of reflection. So here's the key thing that he said, which makes it, for me, just great. He said, reflection is an added, I don't know how to say this exactly. Consciousness is immediately experiencing all the time, right? You're seeing, you're hearing, you're tasting, you're touching. That's consciousness, right? I mean, if you're awake, all of those senses are their immediate experience. Now, let's say that you were sleepy in the last sit. Was anyone sleepy in the last sit? That's immediate experience. Being sleepy is right. I mean, that's what you were immediately experiencing, right? What would it be to be mindful of that immediate experience? You'd be reflecting on the fact that you were sleepy, right? Which is totally different. Think about it, right? I mean, you're reflecting on the fact that you're sleepy. So, according to Naviero, and so this is my little definition, but this is really, as I said, this is really what he's saying. Mindfulness occurs when consciousness can reflect on what it is presently experiencing. I just love that. You know why I like that?
No, can you repeat it?
I am going to. I like it because I thought of it myself. So you see my little ego. Okay, so mindfulness occurs when consciousness reflects on what it is presently experiencing. It's a double, in other words, it's two layers. Because the immediate experience is consciousness. Yeah? Do you get that? I mean, whatever you're doing, I mean, you're experiencing in this moment doesn't mean that you're mindful of it. Mindfulness would be reflecting on it, that extra layer of consciousness. Okay, so here we go. Right this moment, everybody in the room is hearing, right? Aren't you hearing? Is anybody in this room not hearing? Right? Does it mean that you're mindful of hearing? No. If you're mindful of hearing, you will start reflecting on the experience of hearing. That's your consciousness. Your consciousness will go to reflecting on hearing. So, I'm losing yarn. I can tell that no one understands this at all. I'm just kidding. So, one of the reasons why I find this fascinating is because I've always been curious by what the Buddha meant by contemplating. Don't you think maybe he meant reflecting? So when the Satipatthana Sutra says contemplating body, contemplating feeling, contemplating consciousness, contemplating the object of consciousness. So I think that what Naviero just translated that word as reflecting on body, reflecting on feeling, reflecting on the content, I mean the mind itself, consciousness, and then the fourth one on the object of consciousness. So that is extremely helpful for me. Even just as we were sitting, I mean, I was looking at one person, they were sleepy, right? You all know that I peek, because as we said. I don't think anyone peeks but me. Does anyone else peek? Does anyone peek and look at me? Come on, tell the truth. You do. Well, Travis. What would be really bad if you peek and look at me when I peek and look at you, right? Oh no, we've just caught each other. But I was looking at someone who was kind of drooping over, right? And I thought, now on a certain level, they know, they're conscious that they're sleepy. I'm sure they were, right? But they weren't able to reflect on it, right? Or be mindful of it. So when I found out that Inside LA has become Inside LA and LB, and I really felt that they were choosing to directly compete with Long Beach Meditation, which they have every right to do. And so when it made me really very angry, I was not able to reflect on my anger. I just wasn't. And why? It felt good. poor us. And the self-righteous and all of that. And then when I was able to begin to admit that, that there's nothing in your life that should be excluded from mindfulness, right? What aspect of your life is that? Well, I'm putting this over here, right? I'm putting this part of my life over here because I don't want mindfulness to be bothering with that. Obviously, that's again the whole in opposition to this idea of expanding the territory of mindfulness, right? The prayer of Jabez, is it Jabez? The prayer of Jabez is let's expand mindfulness and the capacity to reflect on what we are presently experiencing. Does that seem impossible? It doesn't, does it? Say no. Humor me. It doesn't, does it? It's like it's a big thing to aspire to, but it seems to me that it's like, see what that's what we were born to do in some way. Literally. So I couldn't decide whether this talk was about the third foundation of mindfulness or whether it was about defining mindfulness, but it turned out to be about both. And for me, now I have been kind of studying. I think that's as close as I could describe what I do. I've been kind of studying the Dharma for 30 years. And this is the first time I have actually felt like I have a definition of mindfulness that worked for me. That's a big, I've not heard a Dharma teacher give a definition of mindfulness that worked for me. And I never gave one, right? And so this is a historical moment. No, but it is good because I would like to suggest that it would be helpful for you to kind of consider that it is nothing but the capacity of consciousness to reflect on what it is presently experiencing. That's all I have to say.